Hi there, this is Danny Flexen for Seconds Out. Delighted to be joined by my great colleague Ayman Khan. Ayman, how are you doing?
Danny, it's been a long, long time. I haven't seen you for a while, so good to see you again. It feels like I'm learning more from you, bonding more from you from these Zoom sessions. If only we could do it in person, but yeah, just great to see you again after a really, really long time.
Well, you can see that you've influenced me with the beard as well, so we're getting there. It's not as big as yours. I need more time. The beard, I'm still talking about the beard, everyone. Um, but we're here this time to talk about, unfortunately, PEDs in boxing reared its ugly head once again. And this time, and a real shocker, I've got to say, this time round with Amir Khan testing positive. And I'm not saying it's ever predictable, but there are times when someone gets an adverse finding or tests positive, and you think, yeah, I could kind of see that coming, whether it's, an increase in their power or whether it's their physique that's changed or whatever it might be. But with Khan, he's always been so anti-drugs. We know Lamont Peterson got tested positive when he was training for Khan for their aborted rematch. And he's always been very against it. We spoke to him about the CONOR BENN situation. And yeah, real surprise to find out. I guess not just that he tested positive for Osterene, but also that no one knew about it, even though it was a year ago when the positive test was announced, at least to some of the people involved. What was your initial reaction to the news?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, look, it was a bit of a gut punch, to be honest with you. There's no secrets, kind of knowing my name, looking at my face. I'm of South Asian descent, and boxing was essentially a Amir Khan for me when I was growing up. I only watched, the Olympics, him coming out of there, and he was massive, wasn't he? He was featured on national TV. Someone's big when you have these stories, powder puff stories of Amir Khan goes to see his greatest fan. It's a 90-year-old grandma who absolutely loves Amir Khan. You had those stories. It was a real big national treasure at the time, and up until I was about 14, I only knew boxing for Amir Khan fights, and then I went to uni, and then I really got delved and invested into boxing more so it had a real influence on me and a positive influence in the community, considering that when it comes to stories about us as a community, it's mainly negative. So he was a real shining light for that. So followed his career, many great fights, many great entertaining fights. Whether he won or lost, you knew you were getting great value in whatever fight he fought, including some of the controversies and including him as a person as well, being very much happy-go-lucky, I guess, and making a few mistakes here and there. It looks like towards the end of his career, it sounds like he's made a mistake, whether it was intentional or unintentional. He's made one here, which might cost him his, as he fears, his legacy. And just when I saw that, legitimately, I was genuinely shocked. I was like, someone was talking to me about it, and they didn't mention the name. I was like, "Oh, are you going about Ben? What's the latest developments with Ben?" I was like, "Ben," and they said to me, "Ben, no, you need to go check the news." I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Go check the news now. It's about Amir Khan." And I said, "What? Really?" And like you don't look at Amir and kind of think, he maybe it's because of the vulnerabilities that he's had in the ring. You don't really look at him as a fighter who might have taken any form of performance enhancing drugs, but that seems to have been the case here. And it was just genuinely a real shocker. I remember having a conversation with someone as well a few weeks back on the phone. It was like, who in boxing, if it came out and they'd used performance enhancing drugs and they got caught for it, would really kind of get you. And Amir and another number of fighters was on that. It's kind of a real, yeah, just a kick in the teeth when I saw that come through.
Yeah, I agree. And it's just it's hard to kind of process because you have to, as people have been saying, keep the same energy for
Mm.
Khan as you have for Ben. And there's stuff where you're thinking, well, he is retired and yeah, he did lose the fight, but you've got to kind of take all that out of your mind. As Kell Brook said, he's gone in there. I don't think he had the intention to do any of these things, but he said, oh, I could have ended up dead or in a wheelchair and all this stuff. I mean, I think Kell's maybe over egging it little bit. I think, it doesn't having a bit more publicity and a sympathetic light for Kell Brook given recent events isn't the worst thing in the world, but that shouldn't take away that Amir Khan did something wrong. Now, I know UCAD and the board that judged the ban, he got a 2-year ban, have said that they don't think he took it intentionally, but that seems to be based mainly on the fact that the trace in his system was so small. Now, there's a number of reasons. I'm not a scientist, but there are a number of reasons why it could be small and still be intentional. Partly that, when they tested, because it could just be leaving his system at that point. It could be micro dosing, which I know people have talked about as well. So, we can't excuse it. And a 2-year ban's still pretty hefty. I think what a lot of people are perhaps frustrated about in light of the Conor Benn situation is that he hasn't received a ban because he hasn't gone through the process with UCAD and the Board of Control. Now, the counter argument to that is Khan's happy to do that because he knows he's never going to fight again anyway.
Hmm.
And then you've got to think there was talk about a rematch with Kell Brook for a little while before Khan officially announced his retirement. He knew about this. There don't seem to be any doubt that Khan himself knew about this not long after the fight. So, how much of an influence, how much of a bearing did the positive test and the ban have on his ultimate decision to retire?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd say to you, look, Khan's gone through the process, and maybe he's a retired fighter, so maybe it doesn't mean more as much to him. I would count that and say to you, look, reputation is massive amongst our community, and to keep that and to be known as a cheat is damning for him. This is a fighter who he's crossed over into the mainstream massively. He's on your TV shows. I'm a Celebrity. He's on another I'm a Celebrity TV show in South Africa. I think the ITV representatives are in talks of maybe trying to take him out of the show in some form. I don't know how they'll do that, considering it's been recorded already, but that's the talks of it. Amir's a pundit that's been used on Sky Sports. He's someone who does a lot of charity work. If you lose that reputation for being a cheat, then you're done. He's a much more massive stature than he is of Conor Benn. So I think Amir here, look, and the two situations are different, like you said from the outset as well. Amir's come and fronted and taken up that process and done it and been there, fronted up for it, and is now doing these interviews and is open to speaking about it. Whereas Conor Benn is fighting it and hasn't gone through the process. They've circumvented the process by using this WBC process and the document, as opposed to actually going through the UCAD and the British Boxing Board of Control to actually try and clear the name. Whether the feeling is that they can or can't is another conversation. But look, there are still fights there for Amir too. Look, he might be a retired fighter, but Eddie said himself, look, and Frank said himself, look, they're trying to make fights for him. So if there are fights in prospect for him, there's money to be made still for him. So this retired fighter stuff, yeah, I don't agree with, especially when there are exhibitions with Floyd Mayweather mooted about as well, or Manny Pacquiao as well too. So he needs to clear his name, and if he doesn't fight again, this is the last thing he'll be remembered for. So in essence, actually, I think he's put himself in a position where he does actually have to fight again after this ban finishes, or again another circumvention of the process in some sort of way across in another country. So yeah, look, I think Amir, he's gone the right way about it in terms of kind of looks putting his point of view across. That's for the fans and the people to decide whether they agree with him, to say that they take his point. But look, you've got to also, when fighters fail tests as well, I'm not certain as to why a lot of people kind of just look at that fight as a singular fight and that singular test. I appreciate that they've not failed tests in the past, but for me, it kind of puts the whole career into a question. I remember Oscar Valdez, he failed a test. I remember putting that to Eddie Hearn. The fight went ahead, and the previous fight before, he scored a killer knockout punch to absolutely flatten his opponent, and we've never seen that really from Oscar Valdez, that sort of finish from him before. So do we not talk about that as well? And could they have been using at that point too? I think for me, like your whole kind of career has to put in perspective too, as to whether you've taken those. You'd worked with the likes of Alex Ariza as well. A lot of questions about Alex Ariza too in the past as well. So yeah, it's again a very disappointing end to Khan's career, but one that you feel now has to push Khan towards being back in the ring. And the other point as well too, I'd like to add is why are Matchroom trying to make fights for Amir Khan? He's a faded fighter. He shouldn't be in the ring. Why are they trying to make fights for him? What is that to?
We'll talk about who knew what when in a moment. I want to ask you quite a tough question, but as a member of the British Asian community and someone
Yeah.
who looks up to Amir Khan, as you've said, do you feel he's let you down?
Um, Look, degree, because you got your strict liability, so you got to be responsible for whatever comes into your body. It's whether I believe or not believe that Amir Khan intentionally ingested that substance or not. For me personally, I don't believe that it was unintentional. Knowing that, I think if I wasn't in boxing now, I was a bit more of a casual consumer of boxing. Having heard instances of what boxers say, I think Larry Albany were mostly said, look, 80 to 90% of boxers, they're all on things, and look, that's all alleged, of course. That's not the case as a factual point, but when you hear people in the industry and others who've said off the record that this is the case, and now a fighter has come out, it kind of puts the whole game into perspective for myself. So yeah, look, from my point of view, I feel let down that this has happened. But I also kind of feel like, look, this has happened. You've taken your course, and I think to a degree, look, you it's a case by case basis, but I think there can be avenues where if you can prove this in a distinct manner that your consumption was unintentional, you there is paths for you back into the sport, as long as that consumption that you've can be, it won't continue, or you won't get the benefits across the rest of your career. But that's a very loose and vague kind of description that I'm giving to you. I don't know how that would actually apply. Again, I'm not scientifically clued up on all of that. That's not my position. But yeah, in a conclusion, yeah, I do feel let down as to what's happened here with Amir.
Now, usually when there's a failed test, obviously the promoters and the fighters' teams are informed as soon as possible, as soon as it's confirmed. In this case, we had boxer promoter, obviously boxer staged Khan Brook, boxer promoter Ben Shalom saying he only found out via social media this week. And Eddie Hearn then casted aspersions over that, which prompted kind of threats of litigation potentially from Shalom. Robert Smith, I think on TalkSport, the General Secretary of the British Boxing Board of Control, said they'd known about it for a long time, like since it was actually revealed last year, but that all the UCAD process, while the process is still ongoing, is confidential. And that's something we've seen from the board before. What Hearn said, because I have seen it, was that a lot of people knew about the Khan positive result. He didn't say specifically Shalom knew or Boxer, but he did say, you know, in these situations, the promoters are normally told, and a lot of people knew. So the idea that it was only found out this week isn't really true. So I'm not sure how strong the defamation chances are. You've got a legal background, maybe you can tell us, but it does seem strange if it's true that Shalom and Boxer only found out about this kind of a year later.
Yeah, I find that strange too. I think their kind of point is that UCAD contracted with the fighter and not the promoter. So UCAD didn't have a responsibility to tell the promoter in this instance. They just had a responsibility to tell the fighter. I think that's their defense in that. And that sounds tight enough to in statement, but in application, had they not known, had they not found out that this is a close-knit community, boxing is, and word gets around very quickly, for the promoter to not to know, I think it's very hard to believe that would be the case. The likelihood that might have happened was that an injunction, again, I don't know for certain, but an injunction might have been filed by Amir Khan's team, and they might have gone through so that they've been able to hide the case from public consumption for a certain period amount of time, and now it's gone out, which is why it's taken so long. Or it might have just been that the UK process was so long and everyone managed to keep it quiet. I know which one I would err on the side of having happened over the two. But yeah, look, I if I was to be asked whether I thought promoter Ben Shalom knew about it, I imagine he did know about it earlier than what's been portrayed right now.
Yeah, and I mean, again, both promoters in this case, they are helping to paint the sport in a bad light. I think Hearn with the whole CONOR BENN thing is, right, Amir Khan's been banned because of the strict liability rule.
Yeah,
he's been banned because even though the body in question have accepted that they feel he didn't do it intentionally, which is fair enough, they've still banned him for 2 years because of the strict liability rule, which we know UCAD and the board abide by, whereas the WBC, who are the only body that Conor Benn's gone before so far, don't. It's a point in their rules that they don't subscribe to the strict liability rule. So, Hearn kind of, he hasn't really laid into Khan, it's more the process, but Hearn criticising the process is still seemingly unfair because at least Khan has gone through that strict liability rule knowing what it would mean. No one at any stage of the process, aside from Conor Benn in his most recent kind of report to the WBC, has suggested contamination and that kind of thing, which would remove the strict liability element. I would say if that's true, and going back to Conor Benn, we won't dwell on this for too long, he should present that case to the board and let them investigate if contamination is an option. The WBC ruled it out, even though they quote unquote cleared him. So that doesn't present the ball, doesn't present Hearn in a good light, and also trying to make fights for Conor Benn overseas while all this is going on. But then the flip side of that is, if Shalom knew and didn't say and let other people reveal it later on, it doesn't make him look good. And if he didn't know and it was only told a year later, it doesn't make the board or UCAD look good, because the board, Robert Smith, has said unequivocally he knew and it was confidential. But surely that confidentiality doesn't extend to telling the promoter of the fight in question. It just seems very strange. But either way, the sport has once again been rocked by a PED scandal in the UK for the second time in a matter of months.
Third time, Solane Tete as well.
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, I guess that doesn't get as much press because he's not a British native. But yeah, very good point. So we're becoming in the UK kind of a hotbed for this sort of stuff now, which it was bad enough when we were getting kind of all the attention for questionable officiating, judging, and so on. But this is far worse. This is a scourge in the sport, and we're becoming a focal point for it. So yeah, I don't think we said on our previous video about Ellie Scotney and Chantel Cameron that there are no winners here. You said. And I think it's the same here. No one really comes out of this looking good. It's becoming more of a he said, she said thing. But the more people talk about this subject, the worse the look is for British boxing.
Well, I think one positive you can take from this is, look, Conor Benn, although he will profess his innocence, Tete and Amir Khan, you take into as well number of fighters who go through medicals, things are being picked up in terms of their brain injuries and such. It feels like there's been a clamp down to a degree, maybe, or a shift in fighters testing positive for performance enhancers and it being picked up. So maybe to a degree, there is a form of positive here that there's been a shift, and there's now going to be a clampdown, hopefully, on this happening in the future. I spoke to Johnny Nelson whilst this story was developing. I said, look, do you feel that there's more to come? And Johnny said, yeah, I definitely do. I definitely feel that this is just the start of more fighters getting caught using performance enhancers. And the only way to stop it, he felt, is, look, when one fighter fails a test, the whole camp gets brought into question. The trainers, the nutritionists, strength and conditioning, everything and everyone associated with the camp gets caught into question because of that. Now, that seems very harsh measure because there is a possibility that people wouldn't be involved in that. But if you're talking about, clamping down on the scourge, like you said, then that's the way you deal with that. That's a big deterrent. No one will want to use PDs or be associated in that gym if that penalty was there, that you could lose your license because of it, just being associated by it. So look, those are the options there. I don't know how you fully clamp down on it, but it seems like right now there's a move towards that, which is a positive in itself.
Yeah, I mean, that would be another form of strict liability, I suppose. You'd have to be careful who you associate with and who you let into your camp. There's some trainers out there that won't allow their fighters to work with external strength and conditioning coaches or nutritionists. And they kind of want to do it all in-house, which you can understand. There will be gyms out there where fighters have never been suspected of PEDs, and those trainers can kind of look pretty smug at the moment, but you just never know there, but for the grace of God, because you can only police your fighters while they're in the environs of your gym as a trainer. So it's very, very difficult. And that's why with the whole Conor Benn thing, I always had and still have a lot of sympathy for Tony Sims, because I don't think Conor Benn failing is necessary necessarily a reflection on Tony Sims, because fighters now work with so many separate third parties, out in the world in terms of their preparation for a fight, whether it be nutritionists, strength and conditioning coaches, mind coaches, sleep coaches in some cases. There's so many people that now get involved in the process, and mostly positively. But in this case, with PEDs and so on, and there's also the fact that people can take supplements and it's not always clear what's in them. I'm not saying that's an excuse, because I believe in strict liability, but it is more prevalent now, and it's also more you're tested more often as well. So we are going to see more positive results. And I just hope that instead of it'd be nice to see the promoters in this case, Hearn and Shalom, instead of backbiting and bickering, your fighter cheated worse than my fighter, well, you knew before I did, which is a gutter level argument. I'd like to see them come together with the other promoters and try and work out a way that we can get past this PED problem, take something positive out of it rather than having a race to the bottom.
The truth is, though, Danny, like, we can look for, solutions and hope for the best in the situation. But you take a look at Kid Galahad, failed a drugs test. He insisted that he was spiked, so non-intentional, like Amir Khan's was non-intentional, but strict liability was in his system, like Amir Khan, strict liability in the system. Kid Galahad took his ban, and then he was seen as no one wanted to mention Kid Galahad's name whilst he was banned. He was seen as just this negative presence because of the PED positive test. And then look, he came back, and it was all since forgotten. Featured prominently in matchroom fights, featured prominently in world title fights, and now obviously he's had 2 defeats, and he's now looking like he's doing some personal training. But he was allowed back into the sport and featured well by fighters. So that's the truth and reality of what's going to happen here. Not with Amir Khan. If he does fight again, there's enough goodwill for people to forget. I think with Amir Khan, it's different with CONOR BENN, because I think CONOR creates a little bit of a rod for his back, and people have kind of seen through what Hearn is saying. And fighters, I think our generation of the ones that come through, and I think people who've been following boxing for a long time are a lot more clued up now, and then now they're cluing themselves up on the drug testing side too. You got a lot more outlets talking about it too in a factual manner, as opposed to just accepting what's been told to them. But yeah, like, the bottom line of this, it will just get forgotten about until the next prominent fighter fails a test.
We want to know what you guys think. You've heard our opinions on the matter. What do you think about the CONOR BENN situation? What do you think about the Amir Khan positive test as well, and the promoters' involvement in it? And I guess most importantly of all, how would you go about solving, or at least mitigating, the clear PED problem in boxing right now? Appreciate you all watching, and we will probably do more of these going forward. So I hope you enjoyed it, and obviously let us know whether you did or you didn't. Don't be too harsh. I'm a sensitive soul. Really appreciate it. Ayman, closing remarks?
Yeah, thumbs down for Danny Flexen, just because it'd be funny to do that, and type in thumbs down for Danny Flexen in the comments as well too, if you like. Yeah, just my closing comments as well. Like, I'd like to see more fighters. Look, if they've been using, get caught for it, for sure. It's always kind of felt within the boxing community like fighters are kind of secretly taking off cards. Again, all alleged, sure, but they're taking off cards and served silent bans and things. I don't know if that conspiratorial feeling is really true, but that's the feeling amongst the close-knit community. And when a fighter has an injury, nothing's presented, as apparently now social media now demands that when you have an injury, you should have, and promoters demand that you provide that evidence that maybe people are serving something. And that's a horrible feeling to have, or a horrible feeling for a horrible finger to point. It shouldn't be that way, but the point is that it is that way because there's that negative feeling about the sport that is just clouded and riddled with people using performance enhancing substances. So look, the quicker the sport cleans itself up, the better the image is for the sport right now, because the sport just seems like it is in the gutter right now with these negative stories. It's every now and again that you get a good positive story that makes you kind of want to be back in the sport and enjoy it so much. But when you're in these moments, it's not a nice place to be in. So hopefully kind of a move towards a cleaner sport will be found. Sorry, I know it's a closing closing argument, but I just find it so easy for the likes of Eddie Hearn to say, look, the British Boxing Board of Control or UCAD or whatever it is aren't fit for purpose. Well, what's the alternative? What's the solution?
What are you
It's
doing
easy to
about
point
it?
the finger, but if you haven't got any solution for it, then there's no what can you really say about it? I wouldn't like to see any promoter influence on that situation either if they're trying to revolutionize the system, because that would just be in the promoter's favor. So yeah, look, a very difficult situation, and one that if I'm honest with you, I think will just fade into the background and be brought back up again when the next prominent fighter, as I said before, fails again.
Well, let us know what you think, and we will do more of these in future. So we will see you soon. Thanks for watching.